People are thinking that I'm interviewing the person from Game of Thrones.
I know nothing. I'm not that guy. I'm Jon Snow from Channel 4 News, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. What skills could a person bring to journalism if they hadn't necessarily studied it?
First of all, inquisitiveness. Secondly, some degree of verbal coherence, either spoken or written, or both preferably. And a sort of eye for a story, a sort of awareness of what really could lead to some very interesting narrative. But it has to have, a beginning, a middle and an end. And all these things are really obvious, aren't they? I mean, you know what it is that you read, you know what it is that you watch, you know what it is that you listen to. You really have to put them all together and think, well, could I do that? And the answer is you could. I mean, anybody who wants to be a journalist or a media maker, if they want to do it badly enough, they'll do it. And in the end, they can do it very well. I mean, I think there are some people who are just natural and you just build on that. And then there are people for whom it's a bit of a struggle. But if you want to do it, you'll be able to. You may not earn much money, but you may earn a lot eventually.
Could you explain a little bit about your university experience?
Well, I think I could describe myself as a late developer.
Okay.
And I was really pretty poor at school, largely because I wasn't really very interested in what they wanted to teach me. I was more interested in things like music and art, literature to some extent. And I had a real scrabble to get to university. And before I went to university, in order to try and make myself look a bit more interesting for the university, which was still not yet accepting me, I went on voluntary service overseas in Uganda. I had never been out of England, I'd never been on an airplane, and obviously it was an absolutely massive experience. I mean, to be in Uganda was a complete revelation. I suddenly realized that the pampered, middle class, very, luxuriously brought up in the sense, not luxurious in terms of enormous amount of wealth, but my parents, were well off. It was just a stark wake up to the fact that the people I was meeting every day, the kids that I was working with, were seriously bright and seriously motivated and seriously engaged, but had no books, had no, these days, we would have talked about computers, but in those days there was nothing. I saw the injustice of it, and I saw the inequality of it. So when I went to university, I was very fired up. In 1967, the sort of rocking 60s, everybody was rebelling. Everybody was, crying foul. When I say everybody, there were lots of people who weren't, but there were enough people who were to make a noise. And we were really rebels without a cause, and we were looking for a cause. And the cause came knocking on the door in the form of apartheid South Africa, and the discovery that the university was incredibly heavily vested in companies that had holdings in South Africa. And we said, no, this was not acceptable, and they had to get out of these. They said, you're here for 3 years, we're here forever. It's our business, not yours. So there was a standoff. We occupied a building. We were there for 6 weeks. We set up an alternative university, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, the long vacation beckoned, and everybody went home. And they arrested 10 of us, and kangaroo court sent us down. I was rusticated. I could have gone back. But I never did. For a year, yeah. But I never did.
And in that year, is that when you went to New Horizon?
Yeah, basically I knew immediately that I was never going to go back.
Okay.
But of course I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And I heard through the grapevine that this day centre for homeless and vulnerable teenagers was looking for what they called a coordinator. That would be the sort of leader of the project. And I got the job. And I thought I'll do it for 6 months, then I'll find another university.
Yeah.
I hadn't yet given up on being educated. But in fact, the need was so great, the crisis was so great, still is so great, that I stayed there for 3 years.
How do you think one would go about educating people in the awareness of poverty and homelessness in the UK? Because I personally find that a lot of media focuses overseas about poverty, but people kind of blinded to it in the UK?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult, but I mean, because people are not very interested. It's much easier to be interested in poverty abroad than it is to be here. But you know, the fact is, our society, like practically all Western society, suffers gravely from inequality. And at the bottom of the inequality scale are the people who really actually have nowhere to live. Very often they actually have a job, but they have no way of sustaining accommodation because the job is very badly paid and everything else. I mean, the thing which happened in the 60s was the birth of Shelter, which came on the back of one film by Ken Loach called Cathy Come Home, which was a completely brilliant film about a homeless young woman. And it really shook the nation. I mean, probably 15 million people saw the film, which that wouldn't happen these days because obviously the diversity of information, how you get it, means you don't ever really get a blockbuster of a moment with one film. It's often seen at different times in different ways by different people.
But you do get virality within videos.
You do. Yeah, so
and they do have an impact,
I mean,
but
there's
maybe not the same.
no. I think there's no doubt that you could do it again.
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, yeah, I think you could do it again, but it has to be beautifully done. You know, now that we've all seen The Crown on Netflix, we look at the standards of direction there. It's simply unbelievable. If we could ever deploy that, we'd have something.
I've not seen it, but
I tell you something, Wild Horses wouldn't get me to watch a movie about the royal family. But The Crown is actually much more about who we are and how we got here. And the real thing that stands out from it is the writing, the direction, and the use of the camera. It's simply, well, and of course the power of the acting. You know, I mean, unfortunately that's had an impact, but not a social impact. It's not one that leaves everybody saying, I must do this.
how do people come about making change?
Well, I mean, I went into this because I wanted to make change. I mean, I found at New Horizon that, you know, at the end of the day, I wasn't really very good at dealing with these emotional crises that individuals were going through, but I was very good at talking about it. So I thought, well, perhaps really I should be a reporter rather than somebody trying to resolve things. Personally, I think there is no such thing as a neutral human being. Every human being is moved by something and can't really control that. I mean, they're either, you know, they're right, left, centre, whatever, but they are moved by, and that's what one's got to trigger. And therefore I would say that, well, it's a bit explosive to say it, but I think to some extent the best journalists are politically motivated. I do indeed want to see a better world, and I'd like to bring about some degree of change. And yes, I would like to favour, you know, things which produce better outcomes.
How do you stay optimistic and hopeful then for that change?
If I take the sort of micro world of New Horizon, you know, it started as a down at heel, you know, three workers, sort of no resources, no contacts, no real sort of way in. And now there are 35 people working there. It has a turnover of $1.5 million, and it's dealing with 3,000 or 4,000 young people a year and making real difference. So it is possible. Yeah, from small acorns, very large trees grow, and we have to remember that. And you never quite know what it is that will do it. So plug away.
Well, I would try. How do you see the future of TV?
Well, you can never really predict, can you? I mean, who thought that cinemas would suffer in the end at the hand of television, because television was able to produce these amazing screens? You know, I mean, I know you haven't seen it, but I revert back to the Crown, or it could be Breaking Bad, could be anything. But the point is that you can have a beautiful visual experience in your own home in a way. When television was around when I was young, I mean, you know, you watched it, but it wasn't quality picture. You thought it was good because you'd never seen anything else. But the contrast with cinema, I mean, cinema was fantastic by comparison with television. Now, frankly, cinema has a struggle to keep up with the quality of what you're... I'm talking here about the digital quality, because that now matters much more than it ever did, because you can do it. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly going to be one of the major forms of communication. It's bound to be. But for things like news, fast-breaking information, the rest of it, I mean, most people go to Twitter long before they ever go to any television.
I would say I'm that generation
Yeah.
as well.
And, you know, I mean, last year, our average audience would have been about 800,000 on television per night, but we had 2 billion hits on Facebook in 2016. 40% of them in the United States.
Oh, really?
So what do you know? I mean, how can I explain that? Well, I imagine that actually there's a hunger in the United States for some quality news.
That's the great thing, I guess, about putting things on the internet. There isn't as many restrictions for people to see it in different locations.
Yeah.
This is a random question. It's not on the sheet.
But that's the nature of journalism, isn't it? If all you ever asked was on the sheet, we wouldn't have had a very interesting conversation.
How would you define success and how would you define failure for you personally?
Well, I experience failure every day. You know, sometimes I just miss something which I could have got, or I say something which could have been said in a more elegant way, or in a way that might have elicited a more interesting answer. Success is when, for some reason, everything comes together and it works. I mean, so that's on a day-to-day basis. Success, I don't really like the word, to be honest.
Okay.
I think success, ultimately, if you look at it selfishly, is feeling good about what you're doing and what you've done, and what you hope to do. Failure is knowing you've failed to be a success. You know, I mean, it sounds banal, but that's when you feel bad. I mean, you just feel, God, I could have done that better. But I strive for success, and I've still got a long way to go.
Did you notice when you were in America, did you notice a difference in their attitude to success to the Brits?
Actually, I think their attitude to success is much more ephemeral. I don't think, you know, I think it's much more superficial.
Okay.
You know, success is a sort of big house and a big car and all that. Very, very materialistic. And I don't think, in a strange way, I don't think we are quite as materialistic. People would rather have, you know, a slightly better life than necessarily have a bigger house, you know, I think. But who knows?
I just wanted to ask the impact that the freeing of Nelson Mandela had on you as an individual.
Well, obviously it was a massively emotional thing, because after I was sent down from university, I was banned from South Africa because the Secret Service, listed everybody who'd done anything.
Yeah.
And then when they announced they were going to free him, which they announced literally about 36 hours before he came out, they also announced that everybody had been unbanned, you know, press and all that. So I literally got on the next flight with a biography of Mandela under my arm. And obviously I thought a lot about my life, his life, and you know, I knew it was obviously going to be one of the biggest things I'd ever witnessed in my life. Yeah. We got to the gates of the prison, and I was then working on ITV, and ITV had decided to go live between 12 and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because that was the hour he was going to come out. But we didn't even know what he looked like, because, you know, it had been 27 years since the last photographs. I mean, now a prison officer would have grabbed a selfie somehow. But in those days, there was nothing. So A, we didn't know what he looked like. B, we weren't quite sure what part of the prison he was going to come out of. And C, we were working with South African television cameramen for whom it was no great occasion, frankly. I mean, they were white and pretty hardened characters. And we went live at 12 o'clock with no guests, just all the people around us. And you know, I found it very easy to talk and very easy to describe what was going on. Yeah. But he was late. He was an hour late. And they decided to stay on and keep us live. And at one point I noticed on the pictures going out, there were shoes and feet. I thought, what the hell's going on here? And I looked around and I saw that the cameraman had gone to sleep. And the camera had just drooped on the tripod and was now looking at people's feet. So went back and kicked him, and he woke up. But I actually told the viewers, you know, the truth is for some people here, this is no great event. That's why you've just been watching people's feet, because the guy's been asleep. Anyway, when he did come out, I found it completely overwhelming. I mean, it was obvious it was him. He had, you know, Winnie's hand and his hand raised above the head. I admit that I just cried. I mean, you didn't need to say anything anyway, because the crowd went absolutely bonkers. Very emotional, yeah. Yeah.
In your experience, were there any characteristics on meeting, I guess, dictators and horrid leaders that you can say, okay, this is a characteristic that I've seen over and over in specific times?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, having met Idi Amin, Idi Amin was not a wholly nasty person. I mean, he did dreadful, horrible things, but I think he was a kind of psychopath, but also possibly a schizophrenic. I mean, he could be charming and avuncular and the rest of it, and then he could be absolutely vile. I've even seen little traces of it in Donald Trump. I mean, who can be really, really seriously nasty. He veers from pantomime to something very dark, you know, when you're at a rally with him.
Having read your book, there have been lots of situations where you've had to trust strangers, so your life is in their hands if you're crossing borders, that type of thing. How do you know who to trust and who not to trust?
Well, I think in the end that we're animals,
Okay.
and we have a kind of animal sense. Well, I mean, sometimes you get it wrong,
Yeah.
but most of the time something gels within your psyche and you think, well, I'm going to risk it. This guy, you know, probably will do what we want to do. But sometimes it goes wrong, but most times it goes right. Actually, human beings generally are very positive people, and occasionally come across a bad one.
You've just had a fantastic and interesting life, I would say. You've met
I would say I've been lucky rather than successful. Lucky.
Okay.
But that's the biggest thing.
It's luck.
Journalism is about luck. Being in the right place at the right time, being in the right mindset, having perhaps a piece of information which perhaps you've got but nobody else has, perhaps even derived from your own personal experience.
Thank you so much for your time.
No.
I'm sure that
It's a great honour to be on your YouTube channel.